A new beginning. David leaned against the counter at the bustling interstellar immigration facility, scanning the crowd for his next appointment. The holographic displays flickered above, showcasing a myriad of languages and directing new arrivals. His eyes caught sight of Arya, whose slender figure stood out with its ethereal grace. Her features were distinctly non-human, iridescent skin that shimmered under the facility's lights and eyes that seemed to reflect the cosmos. "Miss Arya?" David called out as he approached her. His voice was steady, trained to be calming in the midst of the chaotic arrivals hall. Arya turned, her expression a mix of curiosity and caution. "Yes, I am Arya. You are." "I'm David, your integration officer." "Welcome to Earth," he said, extending his hand, a gesture he remembered not all cultures appreciated. Hesitantly, Arya reached out, her hand cool and smooth against his. "Thank you, David. Earth is different than I imagined." "As it is for most," David smiled, leading her away from the main thoroughfare to a quieter section of the facility. "I'm here to help you get settled, answer any questions you have, and generally make your transition here as smooth as possible." "Transition," Arya repeated softly, looking around. "It is much to process." "I can imagine," David nodded. They arrived at a small cafe within the facility. "Do you drink tea? Coffee? We've got beverages from over 100 planets. Maybe something from your world too." "Tea would be fine, thank you," she said, settling into a chair across from him. Her demeanor was reserved, yet there was an unmistakable sharpness to her gaze, observing everything. David ordered 2 teas on his device, and then focused his attention back on Arya. "So, Arya, tell me a bit about where you're from. What brings you to Earth?" "My planet, Saran, is far from here. We are a quiet people. We keep to ourselves. But our resources are dwindling, and I was chosen to seek aid and new opportunities," Arya explained, her voice low but clear. "That's a heavy responsibility," David acknowledged as their teas arrived. He noticed Arya's interest in the steam rising from the hot beverage, her nose twitching slightly as she smelled the aroma. "It smells different from what we have," she commented. "Probably," David chuckled. "Earth has its own charm, though. You'll find a lot here. Good, bad, and everything in between. Hopefully, more good than bad." Arya took a cautious sip, her eyes lighting up with surprise. "It's good," she declared, a small smile breaking through her earlier apprehension. "That's great to hear," David grinned. "Now, regarding your integration, we'll start with some basic language and culture lessons. It's interactive and should help you get a handle on things quickly." "I am eager to learn," Arya said, a newfound enthusiasm in her tone. "And I am grateful for your assistance, David." "No problem at all. It's what I'm here for. Plus, it's not every day we get someone from Saran. You'll be teaching me too, I'm sure." As they continued to talk, David sketched out a rough plan for Arya's coming days. He was meticulous, aiming to cover all essentials while being mindful of her need to acclimate at her own pace. Arya listened intently, her initial reserve melting away as they laid the groundwork for her new life on Earth. Their meeting encapsulated the beginning of an unexpected journey, not just for Arya, but for David as well. In her, he saw not just a duty to his job, but a bridge to understanding a new piece of the vast, intricate mosaic of the universe. Chapter 2. Cultural Crossroads. David guided Arya through the thronging streets of Earth's cosmopolitan district, a melting pot where species from various planets mingled. The neon lights cast colorful reflections on Arya's iridescent skin, her eyes wide with wonder at the sights and sounds that bombarded her senses. "This area is known as the Nexus," David explained as they walked. "It's where most newcomers get their first real taste of Earth culture." Arya looked around, her gaze darting from one stall to another. Vendors hawked everything from exotic spices to high-tech gadgets. "It's so vibrant," she murmured, almost to herself. David chuckled. "That's one way to put it. It can be overwhelming, but you'll find almost anything you could need, or want, here." As they continued, a voice called out, "David, over here." A man waved from a nearby food stall, a broad grin on his face. "That's Mike," David said to Arya. "He runs one of the best food joints around. Come on, I'll introduce you." They approached the stall, and Mike wiped his hands on his apron as they got closer. "David, who's your friend?" he asked, looking curiously at Arya. "This is Arya. She's new to Earth from Saran," David introduced. "Arya, this is Mike. He knows more about Earth cuisine than anyone else I know. Pleased to meet you, Arya. Any friend of David's is a friend of mine," Mike said warmly. "Hungry? The first round's on the house. What would you recommend?" Arya asked, intrigued by the sizzling sounds and tantalizing smells coming from the grill. Mike thought for a moment. How about starting with something mild? Earth food can be a bit intense for new palates. He quickly prepared a couple of dishes and handed them plates. Arya tentatively took a bite, her expression thoughtful. "It's very flavorful," she decided after a moment, and David laughed. "That's the understatement of the year, coming from a Sarinian," he joked. They spent the next hour sampling different foods, with Mike occasionally joining in, explaining the origins and ingredients of each dish. Arya's initial shyness ebbed away as she engaged more with her companions, asking questions and even making a few jokes. After eating, David and Mike showed Arya around the Nexus, pointing out various cultural landmarks and popular gathering spots. "Each area of the Nexus caters to different planetary cultures," David explained. "It's designed to make everyone from the galaxy feel at home." They stopped in front of a large digital map. "You are here," David pointed, "and each zone radiates out from the center, where we mix it all up. Like a salad bowl." Arya nodded, absorbing the information. "It's a lot to learn, but I'm grateful for the guidance. Earth is so different from Saran. There, we live much more separated from one another." "Well, we're glad to have you here, Arya," Mike said sincerely. "It's always good to get fresh perspectives." As the evening wound down, they made their way back to the transportation hub. "Thank you, both of you," Arya said, her tone full of genuine appreciation. "Today was enlightening." "Any time, Arya. Remember, the Nexus is just the start. There's a whole planet out there for you to explore," David said with an encouraging smile. "And if you ever get a craving for Earth food, you know where to find me," Mike added, waving goodbye as they parted ways. As David and Arya boarded the transport back to her residence, Arya looked thoughtful. "Earth is complex," she said after a moment, "but I'm beginning to see its charm." David nodded, pleased. "You're doing great, Arya. It'll feel like home before you know it." As the transport whisked them away, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, eager to see how Arya's journey would unfold. Chapter 3. Language of Gestures. David and Arya sat side by side at a long, sleek table in the bustling language exchange center, where humans and aliens gathered to share their languages and cultures. The hum of dozens of conversations filled the air, a testament to Earth's diverse inhabitants. "Welcome to the Polyglot Pavilion," David said, offering Arya a reassuring smile as they scanned the room. "Here, everyone's a student and a teacher." Arya observed the interactions with a keen interest, noting the hand gestures and facial expressions that accompanied the spoken words. "It's fascinating," she remarked. "On Saran, our language is very formal. This is very different." "Just wait until you're in the thick of it," David chuckled, waving over a man approaching their table. "This is Tom. He's one of the volunteer coordinators here." Tom, a tall man with an easygoing demeanor, extended his hand to Arya. "Nice to meet you, Arya. David has told me a lot about you. Ready to dive into some linguistic adventures?" Arya shook his hand, her previous apprehension giving way to curiosity. "Yes, I think so. What do I do?" Tom pulled up a chair and sat down next to them. "Well, we usually start with simple greetings and everyday phrases. I'll help you both set up a practice session with a group. You can listen in, join the conversation, and when you're ready, try out some phrases." He led them to a group that was practicing English, consisting of both humans and several alien species. "Everyone, this is Arya. It's her first day, so let's start with something easy." The group greeted Arya warmly, and one human, Jack, took the lead. Let's begin with hello, how are you? Pretty basic, but it's a good icebreaker. Arya listened and then attempted the phrase, her accent slightly off but understandable. The group applauded, encouraging her. She smiled, her confidence growing. Jack, noticing her interest, switched to teaching her some common idiomatic expressions, explaining, these phrases don't always make sense literally, but they're used a lot in everyday conversation. Why do humans say, it's raining cats and dogs? Arya asked, genuinely puzzled. David laughed. It just means it's raining very hard. No one really knows why we say it that way. As the session continued, Arya's fluency improved with each attempt. She started asking questions about why certain words were used, and the group engaged in a lively discussion about language and culture. Seeing her so animated, David felt a deep satisfaction. You're doing great, Arya, he whispered to her during a brief pause. I'm enjoying this more than I thought I would, Arya confessed. It's challenging, but in a good way. After the session, Tom rejoined them. How was it? He inquired, looking between Arya and David. Very educational, Arya responded. I understand so much more now, not just about the language, but also about how people think here. That's the beauty of this place, Tom agreed. It's not just about learning to communicate. It's about understanding each other's worlds. As they left the center, David asked, what do you feel like doing next? Arya thought for a moment, then said, I'd like to keep practicing. Maybe next time, I can teach some Cyrenian phrases. Sounds like a plan, David replied, pleased to see her embracing her new life on Earth with such enthusiasm. They parted ways, Arya to her temporary home and David back to his office, both enriched by the day's experiences. The bond between them, facilitated by shared learning and genuine curiosity, was becoming a strong foundation for their burgeoning friendship. Chapter 4. Closer Encounters. David unlocked the door to his apartment, a modest but cozy space filled with souvenirs from his travels and an assortment of earthly and alien technologies. Welcome to my place, he announced, stepping aside to let Arya enter. Arya surveyed the room with an artist's eye, her attention caught by a mixed-media painting on the wall. This is beautiful. Did you make this? She asked, her voice tinged with surprise. David laughed lightly, closing the door behind them. No, I'm afraid my artistic talents are pretty limited. A friend from Mars made that. He's trying to merge human and Martian styles. It's fascinating, Arya said, still examining the artwork. It seems each piece tells a story. That's exactly what he says, David agreed, guiding her towards the living area. Make yourself comfortable. Can I get you something to drink? Water, tea. Water would be fine, thank you, Arya replied, taking a seat on the plush sofa. Her gaze continued to roam the room, taking in the eclectic mix of decor. David handed her a glass of water and sat down across from her, his curiosity about her homeland evident. I've shown you a bit of my world, both out there and in here. What about Saran? What's it like? Arya took a sip of her water, gathering her thoughts. Saran is very different. Much quieter. We value solitude and reflection. Our homes are designed to be retreats from the world, not gateways to it like yours seem to be. That sounds peaceful, David mused. But maybe a bit lonely? It can be, Arya admitted, especially now that I am here, where everything is so interconnected. David nodded, understanding the sentiment. It's a big adjustment, but you seem to be handling it well. I am trying, Arya said with a small smile. She then noticed a small, intricately carved box on the coffee table. What's this? Oh, that's a puzzle box from Japan, David explained, picking it up and handing it to her. It's a traditional design. You have to move the pieces in just the right way to open it. Arya turned the box over in her hands, her fingers tracing the carvings. May I? Of course, David encouraged. The room fell into a comfortable silence, punctuated only by the soft clicks of the puzzle box as Arya experimented with different movements. After a few moments, the box clicked open, revealing a small compartment inside. Well done. David exclaimed. "It took me a lot longer to figure that out the first time." Arya's smile widened. "It's similar to something we have on Saran, though ours tend to be more about balance than movement." "That's interesting," David said, leaning forward. "Maybe you could show me one day?" "I would like that," Arya responded, her eyes meeting his. In that moment, a mutual respect and understanding deepened between them. David leaned back, his mind whirling with ideas. You could incorporate some of your culture into your living space here. Make it feel more like home." Arya considered this, her look thoughtful. "I might need some help with that. Our aesthetic is very different." "I'd be glad to help," David offered eagerly. "It could be a good project for us. Plus, I'd get to learn more about Cyrenian culture." "Thank you, David," Arya said sincerely. "I appreciate your friendship more than I can say." As the evening progressed, they discussed potential ideas for decorating Arya's temporary home, each suggestion helping to bridge the gap between their worlds a little more. By the time Arya left, not only had they planned a visit to a local decor store, but they had also laid the groundwork for a deeper, more meaningful connection, one that promised to enrich both their lives in unexpected ways. Chapter 5. Echoes of the Heart. Under the vast, starlit sky of Earth's evening, David and Arya found themselves walking side by side through a quiet park, far from the bustling energy of the city center. The serene atmosphere, punctuated only by the occasional call of nocturnal wildlife, offered a perfect backdrop for deeper conversation. It's strange," Arya began, breaking the silence as they walked along a winding path illuminated by soft, ambient light from ground lamps. "Back on Saran, I often looked up at the stars and felt so isolated. Here, it feels like I'm connected to something much larger." David glanced at her, noticing how the starlight reflected in her curious eyes. "It's funny how a change of perspective can alter feelings of connection or isolation. Earth can be overwhelming, but it's also filled with connections and complexities." They reached a bench overlooking a small, tranquil lake and sat down. The reflection of the moon danced across the water's surface, creating a mesmerizing effect. "Tell me more about Saran," David urged gently, eager to understand the contrasts Arya faced. Arya sighed softly, her gaze fixed on the shimmering water. "Saran is beautiful in its way. Vast plains, silent forests, cities that blend into the landscape. But it's a solitude that we cherish. Here, everything and everyone is so interwoven." David nodded thoughtfully. "Do you miss it?" "Sometimes," Arya admitted, turning to look at him. "But I also appreciate the new rhythms here. The heartbeat of Earth is vigorous, varied, and vibrant." "Speaking of heartbeats," David said, shifting the topic slightly, "you mentioned once that Cyrenians' heartbeats are different. How so?" Arya's lips curved into a small smile, delighted by his interest. "Our hearts beat slower, much slower than humans. It's said that you can hear the rhythm of Saran itself in our pulse." "That must have been quite an adjustment, coming here," David reflected, his voice full of genuine curiosity. "It was, at first. I felt out of sync with everyone and everything," she replied. "But sitting here with you, listening to the peaceful night, it reminds me of home." David felt a warmth spread through him at her words, pleased that he could offer her some comfort. "I'm glad to hear that, Arya. I've been thinking, we've learned so much from each other already. What if we shared more about our cultures? Maybe not just through stories, but through music, art, even food." "That sounds wonderful," Arya responded enthusiastically. "I would love to share more of Saran with you, and I'm eager to discover more about Earth through your eyes." They spent the next hour discussing potential cultural exchange ideas, from attending a classical Earth symphony to organizing a Cyrenian music night. As the evening drew to a close, and they prepared to leave the park, David stopped and turned to Arya. "I have to say, this has been an enlightening evening. Your perspective on things, it's refreshing." Arya touched his arm lightly, a gesture of friendship and gratitude. "And your willingness to understand and learn about where I come from. It means more than you know." Together they walked back towards the city, their steps in sync, a silent acknowledgement of their growing bond. The night had deepened their understanding of each other's worlds, drawing them closer in their journey of mutual discovery. As they parted ways at the transport station, the echoes of their heartfelt conversation lingered, a promise of many more to come. Chapter 6. Forbidden Rhythms. As David and Aria's friendship deepened, the diversity and richness of their cultural exchanges began to draw attention. Not all of it was positive. Earth had its share of tensions and prejudices, and the idea of a human and an alien forming such a close bond was not universally accepted. One evening, as they left a lecture on interstellar cultures at a local university, a man approached them. He was dressed in a nondescript suit, his expression stern. "David Matthews?" he inquired, his voice carrying an edge that made David stop in his tracks. "Yes, that's me," David responded cautiously, positioning himself slightly in front of Aria. "Can I help you?" The man's gaze shifted to Aria, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I'm just curious about your association with an alien. Don't you think it's a bit inappropriate?" David felt a protective anger flare up, but kept his tone even. "I don't see how it's inappropriate to share knowledge and friendship." Aria, sensing the tension, spoke up, her voice calm yet firm. "I am here to learn and share, just like any other being. Earth is known for its diversity. Is it not something to be celebrated?" The man scoffed, shaking his head. "Diversity has limits. You should be more careful about who you associate with, Matthews." With that, he turned and walked away. David watched him go, his jaw set. He turned to Aria, who looked more sad than frightened. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," he said quietly. Aria shook her head. "It's not your fault, David. It's just the reality of this world, isn't it? Not everyone is ready for change or differences." They decided to go to a nearby cafe to talk more privately. Once seated, David sighed, looking troubled. "Aria, if this is causing you any problems—" "David, stop," Aria interrupted gently. "What we are doing, learning from each other, sharing our cultures, it's important. We can't let narrow-mindedness stop us." David nodded, grateful for her strength. "You're right. We can't. And we won't. But we should be aware of the challenges. We might face more resistance as we go forward. Then we face it together," Aria said with a determined look. "Just like we've shared everything else." The conversation shifted to planning their next cultural exchange event, a public demonstration of Cyrenian music and Earth jazz fusion. They spent the rest of the evening in deep discussion, planning every detail to ensure it would be a celebration of unity and diversity. As they left the cafe, they encountered another passerby who had overheard their conversation. Unlike the first man, this one smiled warmly at them. "It's good to see such open exchanges between cultures," he commented. "Don't let the critics get you down. There are many of us who support what you're doing." Encouraged by his words, David and Aria thanked him, their spirits lifted. The negative encounter earlier had been unsettling, but the support they now received reminded them of the positive impact of their efforts. Walking Aria to her transport, David felt a renewed sense of purpose. "No matter what happens, we're making a difference, Aria. Let's keep going." Aria agreed, her earlier resolve strengthened by the support. "Let's." "Good night, David, and thank you." As they parted ways, both felt the weight of the challenges they faced, but also the strength of their resolve. The night had brought both confrontation and support, but more than anything, it reinforced their commitment to their mission of fostering understanding and tolerance through cultural exchange. Chapter 7. The Alien's Heartbeat and the Human's Touch. The evening of the cultural exchange event had arrived, and the air buzzed with anticipation. David and Aria had worked tirelessly to create a setting that blended elements from both Earth and Saran, hoping to showcase the beauty of cultural harmony. As guests began to filter into the venue, a beautifully decorated hall within the city's cultural center, David surveyed the room with a sense of pride. Each table was adorned with a centerpiece that featured earthly flowers and Cyrenian crystals, shimmering under the soft lighting. Aria, dressed in a traditional Cyrenian gown that glowed faintly in the dim light, joined him by the entrance. "It looks wonderful, David," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "Thanks to your ideas," David replied, offering her a smile. "Ready to start the evening?" Absolutely, Arya nodded. They walked to the stage, where a small jazz band was setting up alongside a group of Cyrenian musicians. The fusion of instruments, a mix of earthly brass and Cyrenian stringed instruments, promised a night of unique melodies. David addressed the gathering first. Welcome, everyone. Tonight, we celebrate not just the music of Earth and Saran, but the potential for unity and understanding that comes from sharing our cultures. Arya followed, her voice steady and clear. We believe that music, a universal language, can bridge the gaps between worlds. Thank you for joining us on this journey. The music started, a gentle blend of jazz and Cyrenian folk melodies, creating a captivating harmony that drew applause from the audience. As the evening progressed, David and Arya moved among the guests, their interactions warm and welcoming. During a quieter moment, they stepped out onto a balcony overlooking the city's skyline. The night was clear, and the stars shone brightly, a perfect backdrop for their private conversation. Arya, have you ever thought about how small moments can feel so significant? David asked, watching the city lights. Yes, like the quiet before a song begins, or the pause before applause, Arya replied. Why do you ask? Because tonight feels like one of those moments. The music, the people, the atmosphere. It's all so fragile, yet powerful. Arya leaned against the railing, her gaze thoughtful. It's the same with us, isn't it? Our friendship, what we're trying to do. It could so easily be overshadowed by doubts and fear. But here we are, making it work, making it matter. David nodded, his eyes meeting hers. Exactly. And that's why this, us, feels important. He hesitated for a moment before continuing. Arya, the first time we met, I was struck by how different our worlds were. Now, I'm amazed by how similar we can be. How do you feel about all this? Arya's response was soft, yet confident. I feel like every heartbeat, mine and yours, has brought us to this moment. The alien's heartbeat and the human's touch. Love across space. It's not just a theme for tonight. It feels like a description of us. David reached out, his hand brushing hers, a gesture of intimacy and connection. I feel that too, he said quietly. They stood together, the sounds of the party filtering out to the balcony, enveloped in a moment of understanding and mutual respect. It was clear that their relationship had evolved, guided by shared experiences and a deepening emotional bond. As they returned inside, the applause for the concluding musical number swelled, mirroring the feelings that surged between them. The night had been a success, not just in terms of the event, but in the undeniable affirmation of their connection, a testament to the power of reaching across cultural and interstellar divides to touch another's heart. Chapter 8. A New Dawn. The cultural exchange event had left a lasting impression on both Earth and Saran, sparking interest and dialogue in communities across both planets. The success had propelled David and Arya into planning further events, but for now, they were taking a moment to reflect on their achievements in a newly opened park designed for interstellar relations. As they walked through the serene landscape, which featured a blend of earthly plants and Cyrenian flora, David turned to Arya with a smile. Can you believe how far we've come since you first arrived? It's been an incredible journey, Arya agreed, her eyes taking in the scenery. This park is a symbol of what we've managed to achieve, a place where anyone, human or alien, can find peace and common ground. David nodded, watching as a group of children, both human and alien, played together near a water feature. It's like we're building a small new world right here. As they continued their walk, they were joined by Tom, who had been instrumental in their outreach programs. David, Arya, the Council wants to feature your story in the next Interstellar newsletter, he announced, his face beaming with pride. That's fantastic news, David replied, clearly pleased. It's a great opportunity to show how cooperation can lead to real change. Tom nodded. Exactly. They're calling it unity in diversity. I think it perfectly captures what you've both been working towards. Arya looked thoughtful. I never imagined I'd be part of something like this. Back on Saran, I was just a librarian. And now you're a pioneer, Tom said, clapping her on the shoulder. You're showing everyone how one voice can make a difference. As they reached a viewing platform that offered a panoramic view of the park, David suggested, "Let's take a moment here. I want to discuss our next steps." They settled onto the platform's benches, the city skyline in the distance providing a striking backdrop. David pulled out a digital pad and tapped on it, bringing up their project timeline. "We've got a lot of interest in replicating this model in other cities," he began. "But I think it's crucial we stay involved in the initial setups to ensure they maintain the spirit of what we've started." Arya nodded in agreement. "I would like to contribute by incorporating more educational programs, especially for children. If we can nurture this understanding from a young age, we'll see even greater progress." Tom was quick to support the idea. "Education is key. I'll start putting together a proposal for the council. We could integrate it with local schools and community centers." As they discussed, a cool breeze swept over the platform, bringing with it the gentle sense of earth and Saran flora combined, a reminder of the harmony they were fostering. Their conversation continued into the evening, each point discussed further cementing their resolve. As night fell, and the city lights began to twinkle, David stood, stretching his limbs. "I think we've got a solid plan. Thanks both of you for your hard work and vision." Arya stood as well, a sense of accomplishment radiating from her. "Thank you, David, for welcoming me into your world and making me feel like I can truly make a difference." Tom gathered his notes, ready to leave, but not before saying, "This is only the beginning. We're on the brink of something much bigger." As they parted ways, David and Arya remained a moment longer, looking out over the park they helped inspire. The peaceful evening was a stark contrast to their first encounter in the bustling immigration facility. Now, they weren't just friends. They were co-creators of a new reality, builders of bridges between worlds. "Look at what we've started," David said quietly, his voice full of wonder. "Yes," Arya replied, her hand finding his in the twilight. "A new dawn indeed." Together they watched the night deepen, the stars above them a shared canopy for their united dreams, a silent witness to the burgeoning hope and unity below.